You begin here, with a title that doesn't promise answers, only a quiet presence, as if someone is walking alongside you even when you feel alone. As you move through life in the United States, you pass through a series of milestones meant to help you grow, graduations that celebrate your hard work, jobs that shape your days and test your patience, the joys and struggles of parenthood, the quiet exhaustion of caregiving, and eventually retirement. Each stage comes with its own challenges and small victories, and while the path is often walked alone, these moments connect you to the larger rhythm of life, reminding you that your experiences are shared, even in solitude. These are rites of passage, formalized and often efficient, and yet loneliness arrives quietly in the spaces between the steps. This film walks beside you through those moments, small, ordinary, and shared by many, where connection frays, and sometimes where it can be rebuilt. In a hallway or waiting room, you stand among strangers who are doing their own work of moving forward. Loneliness doesn't always begin with isolation. It starts inside systems that presuppose independence. Think of a clerk handing you a form, a counselor explaining the next step, a sign that points you to the next appointment. Emil Durkheim noticed more than a century ago that when people undergo major life transitions, social bonds often weaken, even when no one intends harm. The system is designed to carry you from A to B, not necessarily to tend the spaces where belonging dissolves. Your days settle into routines. You wake, commute, take your place in institutional rhythms, a lecture hall, a workplace training room, a clinic appointment. These moments repeat without being named or shared. Erickson framed life as a series of stages. Identity reshapes itself at each turn. You might not announce the small shifts you feel inside, a doubt about who you are, a subtle disconnection from old friends, a changing taste in company. Routine both comforts and hides, the fact that you are moving through transitions that deserve acknowledgement. Early loneliness often feels like carrying something inward rather than standing visibly alone. You keep more to yourself, choose quieter seats in shared rooms, laugh less loudly. The American Psychological Association notes that these early patterns shape how safe people feel asking for connection later. If vulnerability is unrewarded or awkward in an institutional setting, you learn to protect yourself. Over time, that protection becomes habit, and the threshold for reaching out rises. Family systems researcher Murray Bowen warned that emotional distance is frequently mistaken for maturity. When dinner tables scatter and evening phone calls thin, the sense of being understood can diminish. You gain freedom, yes, but you also navigate the strange new task of rebuilding the scaffolding of care in different places. Leaving home is celebrated as independence. Dorm keys, lease agreements, new schedules. But independence often arrives with a reduction in immediate emotional support. In school, you are surrounded yet sorted by grades, tracks, extracurriculars, scholarship opportunities. The institution designs categories that place you on certain paths. Robert Putnam observed that as achievement pressure rises, close peer connection often declines. You may find yourself next to people who understand your classes but not your doubts. Friends who are teammates during project season and disappear when the semester ends. The educational system advances credentials while sometimes allowing social ties to thin. When you start your first real job, the language shifts. Feedback, evaluation, productivity. Learning becomes assessment, and belonging is no longer automatic. Labor statistics show early working years can bring a steep drop in perceived social support. You are expected to perform while navigating corporate cultures, mentorship structures that may be sparse, and informal networks that aren't always visible. It's normal to feel competent at the task and unsure about where you fit in as a person. At some point, you might care for an aging parent or a child with special needs, or you may lose someone who once cared for you. Laura Carstenson's work on social motivation across the lifespan shows social circles often shrink as emotional demands grow. Caregiving changes your timetable, priorities, and availability. You learn new vocabulary, doctor's notes, treatment plans, respite care, and within the very institutions that support physical health, emotional support can be inconsistent. The weight of responsibility can quiet your social life without anyone meaning to push you away. As a parent, your life feels fuller and more constricted at once. Time pressure becomes a defining force. Rebecca Adams' research points to time as one of the strongest shapers of adult connection. You trade long evenings with friends for bedtime routines. Weekend plans become logistics. Friendships that were once easy require deliberate effort to maintain. The institution of parenting is public and private at once. Playgroups and pediatric appointments offer settings to meet people, but the energy needed to sustain close adult friendships often wanes. Step back and look historically. Rites of passage used to be woven into communal life. Rites, celebrations, neighborhood work. Historian Robert Nisbet described how many of those functions migrated into formal institutions. Where once a community marked transitions with shared rituals, now schools, employers, and service agencies have taken on those roles. Institutions can be efficient and protective, but they rarely replace the intimacy of a long-standing, geographically rooted community that remembers you across life stages. You might notice fewer places to simply show up without a role, no obligation, no performance. Ray Oldenburg called these spaces third places. Cafes, barbershops, community centers where belonging formed naturally. As those spaces vanish or become commercialized, serendipitous encounters decline. Without third places, the opportunities to be seen and to practice neighborliness reduce. That absence is not dramatic, it's structural and cumulative, a small subtraction of ordinary contact that compounds over years. Loneliness isn't just a private feeling, it shows up in data. The U.S. Surgeon General's advisory in 2023 reported nearly half of American adults experience measurable loneliness. Surveys from multiple organizations point to a persistent, widespread sense of disconnection. These figures aren't meant to scare you. They help make the case that what you feel is common and that systems play a role. Data also opens a path towards solutions that can be scaled, tested, and improved. You carry attachment needs into adulthood. John Bowlby's attachment theory clarifies that the need to feel secure with others doesn't evaporate when you reach a certain age. Whether you seek intimacy, reliable companionship, or quiet recognition, attachment shapes how you approach relationships and institutions. When institutional transitions are abrupt or depersonalized, your attachment system senses a mismatch. The environment asks you to adapt without offering the steady, caring presence that reassures you. Gender shapes how disconnection unfolds. For many men, friendships narrow during adolescence and seldom return in the same form. Niobe Wei's research shows that boys and young men often drop emotionally intimate friendships during adolescence, and cultural expectations discourage rebuilding them. That narrowing is not an individual failing, it's a pattern linked to social norms about masculinity, emotional expression, and institutional expectations that value autonomy over care. Digital tools keep you connected in new ways. Messages, platforms, and groups. But digital connection often substitutes information for intimacy. Research from MIT and other institutions indicates that physical presence and co-attentive practices matter most during life transitions, the kind of knowing that emerges from shared tasks, eye contact, and sustained embodied attention. The screen can sustain awareness, but it rarely replicates the steady mutual presence that calms attachment systems during change. Most institutions do not aim to isolate you. They are designed to move people forward efficiently. Degrees earned, cases processed, services delivered. That intent is practical and often necessary. Standards and metrics protect fairness and safety. But efficiency without deliberate attention to belonging creates a predictable gap. When the goal is measurable outcomes rather than relational health, people can feel seen only as a file, a case number, or a productivity metric. What we measure shapes what we value. Policy and institutions often track jobs, test scores, and graduation rates, tangible, comparable outcomes. Corey Keyes reminds us that mental health without social connection is incomplete. If systems rewarded relational outcomes, measures of community, sustained peer support, mentorship, longevity, priorities might look different. Shifting measurement is not easy, but it's a lever. Metrics influence funding, training, and institutional design. Rituals that help people integrate change take time. Anthropologist Victor Turner noted that rushed rites fail to help people process transitions. You often face expectations to adjust quickly. A new job, a diagnosis, a parenting role. When transitions are compressed, you don't get the reflective spaces that allow identity to settle. The result is a patchwork of compliance without psychological integration, practical movement without emotional anchoring. Transitions hit harder when resources are limited. Loneliness correlates with economic strain, caregiving burdens, and social marginalization. Pew Research Center data shows higher rates of loneliness among people facing financial hardship. Inequality compounds the social costs of transitions. Less time, fewer third places, limited access to supportive services. The burden is unequal. The same rite of passage can be isolating for someone with few resources and connective for someone with strong social capital. Teachers, nurses, social workers, and counselors see these patterns daily. Their observations align with research from programs like Harvard's Human Flourishing Initiative. Social connection matters to health, learning, and civic life. Frontline workers witness how small adjustments, an extra 5 minutes in a conversation, a referral to a peer group, an invitation to a community event, can change trajectories. Their insights are practical, grounded, and rooted in repeated experience. Modern life brings freedom, mobility, and possibility, but it also carries social trade-offs. Zygmunt Bauman described modern life as a landscape of fluidity and choice that can erode long-standing ties. Mobility means you can start anew, but it also means you leave entire support networks behind. Some losses are structural and irreversible. Whole neighborhoods change, industries transform, routines that once anchored social life drift away. Recognizing what can't be undone helps you see where repair is possible and where new forms of connection must be invented. Not everything is lost. Research consistently shows that small, intentional communities restore connection. Mentorship programs, cohort-based training, peer support circles, and structured transitional rituals work. They are simple by design: recurring meetings, shared tasks, mutual commitments. When institutions embed these practices, a check-in built into an orientation, a mentorship match that lasts a year, a facilitated group for new parents, the likelihood of sustained belonging rises. These are rebuildable elements, design choices that can be tested and scaled. You have agency in this too. Seeking support is not a weakness, it's a practical strategy for adaptation. Julianne Holt-Lundstad's research links social connection directly to better health outcomes. Reaching out to a colleague, a neighbor, a practitioner changes risk profiles. Small actions matter: saying yes to a new group, asking a coworker for lunch, registering for a peer-led workshop. You don't need grand gestures. What matters is consistent, deliberate tending to your social life, the way you would tend a garden through seasons of growth and dormancy. As you move through your next transition, remember you are not meant to do it alone. Rites of passage become healing when they are witnessed, when someone else marks the change with you, when institutions remember to make space for small communities, when policies value belonging as much as outcomes. You will move, rights will continue to shape you. Seek company where it exists, create it when it doesn't, and allow yourself the grace to ask for help. For those curious to explore these ideas further, you can find related recordings in our playlist or on this channel. Subscribing allows you to continue following this educational journey, and your comments or likes help guide future content.